Trump is once again very angry at Putin. The anniversary of the Ultimatum terrorist attack and how Ukraine is being drenched by rains. All this and more today on TSN. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're looking forward to your comments. And now, here are some of the most relevant topics this Monday. Night terror. Where did the Russian Kinzhal missiles fly this time? And what are the consequences of the latest Shahid missile strike? A new deadline from Trump.
I'm disappointed in President Putin, very disappointed in him.
Why did the President of the United States once again criticize the Kremlin dictator? And how much time is he giving Putin to end the war? That's 24 drones, 4 cruise missiles, and 3 aeroballistic missiles that the Russians launched overnight and in the morning at Ukraine. Our air defense forces shot down 309 drones and 2 Kh-101 missiles. There were confirmed hits from 2 missiles and 15 drones in 3 locations. The main target was Starokostiantyniv in the Khmelnytsky region. The launches were carried out from various directions: Bryansk, Kursk, Oryol, Milarovo, Shatilovo, Primorsk, and Akhtarsk. The occupiers also used strategic aviation aircraft from the airspace over Saratov and Lipetsk regions. Our aviation, anti-aircraft missile troops, electronic warfare units, drone systems, and mobile fire groups of the Ukrainian Defense Forces repelled the attack. 8 people were injured as a result of the Russian attack on the capital. Among the wounded is a child. Last night, the blast wave shattered windows in a high-rise building in the Darnitsky district. Apartments were damaged from the 1st to the 11th floor. Besides the glass, the walls inside the apartments were also destroyed. On top of that, in Petrovshchina, water flooded people's belongings because there were heavy downpours in Kyiv today. Most of the injuries people sustained last night were from shards of glass. They were cut either at the moment of impact or when they ran outside to escape. A little girl had her feet cut by glass. At the moment, debris is still being cleared at the site. The entrances are cordoned off with tape, and since morning, people have been trying to put their apartments back in order. Nelly Kowalska will share more details.
The sidewalk near the building in the Darnitsky district is covered with a thick layer of glass. You can hear the glass crunching underfoot. From the 1st all the way up to the 12th floor, almost all the windows here have been blown out. On the 1st floor, the shop owners are surprised. They say the outer windows remained intact, but the inner ones were shattered.
The blast wave went that way. So why are the windows broken from the inside?
And glass turned out to be the main cause of injuries. There are 8 people injured here in total. One of them is a small 2-year-old child. Most people have cuts either from glass that flew at them, or injured legs from trying to run out of smoke-filled apartments right over shards of glass. One of our windows was blown out. The police have already been here, documented everything, and filed all the necessary reports. In this apartment, as you can see, there's a huge panoramic window, lived the most seriously injured person. The window was blown out by the explosion, and the man got his hands and face cut. There are still traces of blood all over the apartment. The neighbors gave him timely help, put on tourniquets and belts, and got him into the ambulance. He was in critical condition, but thanks to the quality of the aid he received, he survived. And here, in this apartment on the 6th floor, was basically the epicenter of today's strike, a fragment either from a Shahid drone or a missile, hit here, breaking through the floor and the ceiling of the apartment below. You can see the balcony is completely destroyed, the kitchen is wrecked. It's basically impossible to live here now. And it's an absolute miracle that the residents of this apartment were unharmed. The girl was sleeping in the next room and only suffered a severe fright.
I was sitting at the computer. It was around 2:05. The glass shattered instantly, and the only place it didn't hit was where I was.
It's very dense, about 100 microns. It lasts for half a year to a year.
And right next to the building, emergency headquarters have already been set up. The most popular item is the plastic film that volunteers are handing out to people. The weather in Kyiv is rainy today, so to keep water from flooding their already damaged apartments, People are trying to cover their windows as quickly as possible, at least in this way. Nelly Kowalska, Roman Ripa, TSN 1+1.
During the strike on Starokostiantyniv in the Khmelnytsky region, Ukrainian air defenders managed to shoot down a cruise missile and 26 drones. There were no casualties, however. A building belonging to one of the enterprises was damaged. In Kropivnitsky, during a nighttime attack, the occupiers damaged the regional Philharmonic building, university buildings, and nearby offices. A security guard sustained cuts from blasts. A fire also broke out in one of the state emergency service units. Equipment was damaged there. Kostiantynivka in Donetsk region was attacked again by Russian terrorists. They struck private houses, a fire broke out, and a civilian was injured. At dawn, the Russians shelled residential areas of Kherson. Several apartments caught fire, and at midnight, as a result of a drone strike, a man was injured. A 15-year-old girl and a 49-year-old woman were injured in the Nikopol district. This is in the Dnipropetrovsk region. An apartment building, private houses, and an educational institution were hit by artillery. And in the Synonikivsky district, after an FPV drone attack, a farm and another administrative building were damaged. 3 people were killed and 19 injured in the Sumy region. The day before, a Russian drone dropped explosives directly onto a passenger bus. At that moment, there were 39 passengers on board. Oksana Solodovnik is ready to tell us about the condition of the wounded and what is known about the deceased.
Another Russian terrorist attack in the suburbs of Sumy. In the village of Ivolsansk, a drone dropped explosives that hit a passenger bus. At the time of the attack, there were 39 passengers in the cabin. 3 women died at the scene. They were 66, 74, and 78 years old. All of them had recently been evacuated to Sumy from border communities. But from time to time, they would visit their homes and gardens. And this time, they were on their way there again. This bus has come under enemy fire more than once, since its route runs through the Yunikivka community, where active fighting is currently taking place. On the roads, enemy FPV drones hunt anything that moves. And unfortunately, this particular trip turned out to be tragic. Out of the 19 injured, 5 women were hospitalized.
After yesterday's attack on civilian transport, 16 patients were brought to the hospital. Of the 16 patients, we kept 5 in the hospital for treatment. They underwent surgery and received medical assistance. 1 is in extremely critical condition in the intensive care unit. The other 4 are in different departments of the hospital. The other 11 patients were sent home for outpatient treatment.
Over the weekend in Sumy, there were 5 or 6 strikes every day. There were several hits on the regional administration building. There were fires, but no injuries. A strike on a gas station left 3 people injured. Also the day before, a drone exploded in a crowded area near a store and a maternity hospital. Miraculously, there were no injuries. And of course, there were strikes on critical infrastructure, after which Sumy was left without power for several hours each day. However, energy workers kept bringing the lights back to the homes of Sumy residents. Right now, the biggest problem for the Sumy border area is the shortage of air defense, and everyone feels it. The enemy has changed its attack tactics, and unfortunately, the machine guns that our mobile fire groups are armed with cannot reach the drones that fly too high. Oksana Solodovnik, Alexander Levin, Sumy TSN 1+1.
New deadline for Russia. Donald Trump has announced that he is now giving Putin only 10 to 12 days, starting from today, to agree to a ceasefire with Ukraine. The US president made this statement during a meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Thornbury, Scotland, where he is currently on a visit. Trump once again expressed his dissatisfaction with Putin's actions and the lack of progress in the negotiation process, particularly with the fact that his army is attacking Ukrainian cities with missiles. When asked by journalists whether a personal meeting with the Kremlin leader could fix the situation, Trump replied that he is no longer interested in talks. Earlier, the head of the US had given the Russians as many as 50 days. This happened on July 14th, after which Washington would impose strict tariffs of about 100% on Russian goods. But now, Trump says, there is no reason to wait, even though he wanted to be generous.
We thought we had settled this many times. And then President Putin comes out and starts launching missiles at some city, for example, Kyiv, and kills a lot of people in a nursing home or somewhere else. Bodies are lying all over the street, and I said, that's not how it should be. I'm very disappointed in President Putin, very disappointed in him. So we'll have to see, and I'm going to shorten those 50 days I gave him to a smaller number, because it seems I already know the answer, what's going to happen. All right?
As for a possible meeting between Trump and Putin, today the Kremlin put forward its conditions for such talks, which were announced by its spokesperson, Peskov. According to him, a meeting between the Russian and American leaders can only take place after preparations at the expert level, specifically to prepare, and I quote, the parameters of a settlement. Apparently, that's what the Kremlin is calling the conditions for ending the war against Ukraine. Moscow also emphasized that preparations for a meeting with Trump are not currently underway. Talks about the possibility of negotiations at the leaders' level intensified after the discussions in Istanbul last week. The head of the Turkish Foreign Ministry stated that a fundamental agreement was reached to hold such a meeting in his country. China is also being mentioned as a possible venue for talks between Trump and Putin. There, in September, they will be marking the anniversary of the end of World War II. Both the American and Russian presidents are on the list of invitees. Could Trump's deadline change again? And what will happen in these next 10 to 12 days? Tariffs, sanctions, or just new threats and disappointment from Donald Trump? Be sure to write what you think about this in the comments under the broadcast on YouTube. And of course, like the video and subscribe to the channel. The TSN episode continues, and we still have important things ahead. The European Union is criticizing the new trade deal with the United States. Many countries consider it simply unprofitable. But the European Commission emphasizes that things could have been much worse. However, a trade war between the two economic powerhouses was avoided. At what cost? For more details about the agreement reached by Donald Trump and Ursula von der Leyen and how it will affect Ukraine, watch the report by Radio Svoboda correspondent Zoriana Stepanenko, made especially for TSN.
The months-long tariff saga between the European Union and the United States has finally come to an end. The parties shook hands in Scotland at Donald Trump's private golf club. While the U.S. president was busy with a round of golf yesterday, another match awaited him, an economic one. Unlike Finnish President Alexander Stubb or Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who discussed important political issues with Trump right on the golf course, the president of the European Commission chose not to engage in golf diplomacy with a club in hand. Instead, she waited until the American leader finished his game and was ready for classic negotiations, which were meant to prevent a trade war between the world's largest economies.
People don't realize that this is a more important deal than any other. We're in a complicated situation. If we want to sell cars in Europe, we're not allowed to. And as you know, they sell millions and millions of cars. Mercedes, BMW, so many different ones, Volkswagen, a lot of different cars, millions of them.
Every European car that crosses the ocean in search of an American owner will now cost them more. The United States is imposing 15% tariffs on products from the EU. There are exceptions for airplanes, critically important raw materials, and some agricultural products. This rate is half as high as the one the US threatened to impose in August if an agreement could not be reached. In return, the European Union has committed, for as long as Trump is president, to purchase $750 billion worth of energy resources from the US. This aligns with the EU's plan to stop using Russian gas and oil by 2027. European officials justified the agreement by fighting their own interests. The European Union also committed to investing $600 billion in the American economy. Exactly what the investment will go into and over what period is unknown. Trump only emphasized that EU countries will buy weapons and military equipment from the US, but that's already up to the member states and companies. EU institutions do not approve of such decisions. The business community of the EU's largest economy is criticizing the deal.
This is not the best day for us as representatives of German industry. This agreement hits our profits. We're facing tariff levels we've never seen before. We realize, obviously, there was no other outcome to the negotiations. So we're not saying the negotiations were handled badly. But this is the beginning of a new world trade order.
The German chancellor has generally spoken positively about the deal. Merz is at least satisfied that they managed to prevent a trade war between economies that account for a third of global trade. Meanwhile, France, whose alcohol, cheeses, and cosmetics have long conquered the American market, called the day the agreement was reached a black day. All because of excessive concessions to the United States. The Hungarian Prime Minister says that the EU, quote, caved in. Trump, whom Orban is friends with, ate, as the head of the Hungarian government says, the president of the European Commission for breakfast. The Prime Minister of Italy, the third largest economy in the EU, considers the fact of reaching the agreement a positive thing, but is waiting for the details. The agreement was also supported by the Prime Minister of Spain, but, as he himself said, without enthusiasm. The European Commission, defending the achievement, also emphasized that they managed to avert the worst, and at the same time spoke about the geopolitical significance of the trade agreement between the EU and the US.
It's about security. It's about
security, Ukraine, and the current geopolitical instability. I can't go into all the details of what was discussed yesterday, but I can assure you that it wasn't just about trade. So what I mean is the possibility that the two largest economies and two closest allies can openly discuss all sensitive issues.
The finer details still need to be agreed upon in the coming weeks. In effect, there will be an analysis of all goods traded between the EU and the US and their classification according to the new rules. From Brussels, Zoriana Stepanenko, Marek Hajduk, Radio Svoboda, especially for TSN 1+1.
Today, for the first time at the official level, the memory of Ukraine's defenders, volunteers, and civilians who were executed, tortured, or died in Russian captivity is being honored. The date is not accidental. It was on the night of July 28th to 29th, 2022, that the occupiers carried out a terrorist attack at the Olenivka prison. Ukrainian prisoners of war were held there, the defenders of Azovstal. As a result of the explosions in the barracks, 54 people were killed and at least 130 Ukrainians were wounded. The investigation is being conducted by the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. Investigators base this on the testimonies of those who returned from captivity. 2 heads of the Olenivka colony have been charged in absentia. This is not the only case of Russia's cynical execution of prisoners of war and civilians. Moreover, thousands of Ukrainians are still being held in Russian captivity, suffering torture. Today's day of mourning is not only about honoring memory, it should also draw the attention of the international community to the scale of this tragedy. We remember Olenivka. Events with this slogan are taking place all over the world today. In Kyiv, on Independence Square, relatives of those killed and tortured in captivity, as well as those prisoners who are still in captivity, gathered to remember them all. Natalia Nahorna was following the course of the event.
These are the 3rd anniversary of the Olenivka terrorist attack, the very night when Russia, during a terrorist act, killed more than 50 Ukrainian defenders. More than 130 were wounded. But from today, this day is also the day of remembrance for all those killed and tortured in captivity.
For your glory, for your sacred ideals, to avenge the shame of captivity, to defend our honor,
Several hundred people come to the Independence Square. Today they remember Olenivka, and among them are Azov fighters, those who fought in Mariupol, those who went through Olenivka, and those who managed to survive in that very same Barak 200.
The first thing that comes to my mind is the flames in hell. Because everything was relatively normal, they moved us, transferred us to a separate Barak.
Night, lights out, explosions, and that's it. Just hell, screams, pleas for help, and the mockery of the FSN guards, the administration. At least 50 guys who gave their lives that day.
The fighters say this day is also important to them because it gives them a chance to meet and remember their fallen brothers in arms.
These guys, they are forever. No, they are forever in Valhalla. That's probably how it is. I feel like the sky is crying for them.
The purpose of this event is not only to remember, but also to remind everyone that the Russian terrorists have not been held accountable for their crime.
When the first explosion happened, I ran to the fence. Then, after a while, there was a second explosion. We started shouting. By then, there were a lot of us guys there. We started yelling and calling for the guards to come. Across from us was a section with medics, and we were shouting back and forth with the guys, also medics among the prisoners, yelling to them that help was needed over there. Screams came from Barak 200. They said, We can't come out. We're locked in. The most interesting thing is that almost the next day, by evening, they brought wrists. In those wrists were people taken earlier. So, according to our calculations, they shouldn't have been in Barak 200. They had been taken to Donetsk earlier. For some reason, they ended up on these lists.
Today, there are so many memories here about how people managed to survive and how life changed afterwards. Natalia Nahorna, IR Syrii, TSN 1+1.